Welcome to Leadership in Tech, Thriving in the AI Era, brought to you by the IT Media Group. I'm Nisheen Liu, co-founder and partner with the IT Media Group, a tech leadership-centric media company. I am beyond excited to introduce our panel, starting with our awesome moderator, Tania Ferreira, a global advocate for women in tech initiatives. Joining Tania are Henry Key, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer with Home Trust Company, Brenna Comacchio, Director of Digital Strategy and Analytics with Twilio, Singh, Head of Engineering with Wealthsimple, and Kim Hill, Director, Data Governance and Enterprise Analytics with North York General Hospital. This is the biggest panel with the most time crunch. Over to you, Tania.
The truth of the matter is that this is actually the best panel. All of them have been great, but this is the one that you have been waiting for. And so it's going to be one that demonstrates how AI is being used in a variety of different industries. That is inclusive of insurance, marketing, fintechs, and healthcare. You're going to have some really great learnings, and I want to deep dive straight away because you're going to be excited to hear about all of these. First of all, I'd love to start with Henry. Please, can you tell us and share with us a use case that you are using AI and how it's made a significant impact with respect to your industry?
For ourselves, we're highly regulated and we have a lot of guardrails as to what data we can use and so on. So our first approach was to look at something internal and less intrusive and things that we could manage ourselves. So we started with our service desk and looking at the incident management and the requests that are driven by our employees. So we took a look at that, and what that provided for us was a lot of learnings. The ability to say that we were testing the AI waters, we were able to look at the data and train the models and use things that are readily available to us in the organization. But what resulted in that is that when we start to demonstrate these type of capabilities, it's kind of ballooned into more things that the organization is looking for. So we've started to venture down the path of using AI for our own internal documentation, so that when employees ask questions like, how many vacation days am I entitled to? You can type that in because the documents have already been loaded to our AI to provide that information to you. So there's lots of opportunities, and this is how we're expanding. So there's a laundry list of things that we want to do, but we are staying within the guardrails of what our controls and our compliance and regulators are providing to us.
It sounds like there's got to be quite a lot of creativity there to make sure that you could develop it in the way that you need it and stay true to some of that compliance as well. Thank you. I'd love to hear from Brenna. How does it apply to you? And please share your use case.
I would say at the moment, we are lucky to be at a time where we're seeing the democratization of AI through customer AI features that are coming to market within products. And I'm fortunate to work at a company that actually owns and built a CDP, so a customer data platform, and we have a partnership with OpenAI. So as a result of this, we're able to bring AI features into the product in the form of predictive traits. And with the customer data platform, we have millions of data points about each of our users going on behind the scenes, which we can then use as a feature mart to build out some of these models. So some of these models in the form of predictive traits predict the likelihood that a user will go on to churn, which is really a predictive churn model behind the scenes, or will go on to purchase for a user who's a prospect. So we're seeing a purchase propensity model behind the scenes. So in terms of how we have implemented this from a use case perspective is we really wanted to prevent churn and retain more of our customers and actually save potential lost revenue dollars. So we were able to use some of these predictive models to predict at the account level an account that was at risk. And then we built a personalized campaign for those accounts where we did outreach and tried to save them. I mean, a lot of times it was related to friction or challenges that they had in the product. So we tried to connect them to documentation and even to support to help address those problems in the hopes of ultimately retaining those users. And then we were able to actually track the amount of dollars of revenue saved as a result of this effort.
Return on investment, retention, again, creativity, personalization. I mean, the list goes on. Thank you so much. And I'd love to hand over and hear from Randy, please. How is it being applied in your industry?
The use case I'm going to talk about today is how we've used NVIDIA's AI inference platform at Wealthsimple to monitor fraud in real time against financial transactions. So AI inference models, if you're not aware, allow us to run real-time data through an algorithm trained with historic data to make a prediction. An example of this would be a self-driving car being on a road it's never driven on, but yet because it's been trained with stop signs, it can still recognize a stop sign even though it's a brand new road. At Wealthsimple, we process a large volume of financial transactions. We want to prevent suspicious and fraudulent transactions happening. So we train our model with this past data. So if it sees new suspicious data, we can flag it. So initially, we were experimenting with a native AI inference engine to monitor transactions. However, roughly 5% of those transactions were getting delayed due to a low uptime of the model. By switching to NVIDIA's inference platform, we saw greater than 99% uptime, and we were able to deploy it without any engineering support. Right now, we actually have about 30 models that have run 145 million predictions so far, and we've been able to prevent like thousands in fraud losses. So we've seen firsthand how AI can be used to identify suspicious transactions.
The fact that you've used so many different models, the 30 that you mentioned, and all those millions of transactions that you've been able to do and find out this result is just brilliant. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Kim, I'd love to hear what's happening in healthcare and how the AI is being applied there.
There's copious amounts of use cases in healthcare, so I'll just try and keep it down to a couple. I think we've seen AI right now being used to combat some of the provider burnout by decreasing some of the administration tasks that many physicians, nurses, allied health are having to undertake. So you're seeing AI scribe being implemented to be able to capture the clinical pieces of physician or nurse interaction with patients. There are mandatory documentation in acute care, like discharge summaries that take copious amounts of time for physicians. And so we're starting to see Gen I scour the electronic health record and automate those. Direct patient care, we're seeing predictive models being applied to EMRs to be able to identify patients that may be at risk or for decision support in terms of determining care pathway options, using different bots to be able to follow up with patients post-discharge or procedure and be able to alert care teams whether or not they're adhering to their post-care instructions, or they may have issues that might have led to readmission. So we're starting to see them use that to help avoid that and provide high-quality patient care.
Something that will touch us all in some way, shape, or form, whether it's ourselves or it's our wider family, community. We just need our physicians, our health staff to be supported and taken care of so that they can obviously take care of us and everything can be done in such a smooth manner. Thank you all for your use cases. They're absolutely incredible. And I'm sure that our audience can agree that there's so much there that you can learn from. And I just love to ask our panelists, what is the best advice that you could give? And what's the biggest learning that you've had in your journey? And I'd like to start with Henry once again, if you don't mind.
I think for us, it was just get started. I mean, there are a lot of things out there and there's a lot of noise and there's also a lot of scare and then there's a lot of positives. Just because you can, it doesn't mean that you should. But in this case, you should start so that you are educated as you move forward. We learned a lot just from the service desk standpoint of just applying some data and all the people that you would need and the influence you need to have in an organization to get certain things started. And because of the regulations that we have in our organization, this was a good way for us to learn so that then when we're at the table, we can talk with a little bit of knowledge and expertise. And without having that, you kind of go in a little bit at a disadvantage. So right now, it's huge. And then I think one of the panelists also mentioned that it's ubiquitous across the organizations and industry. So you have to start somewhere. And if you don't start, you're just not going to get ahead. I would just recommend for everyone to start. What about yourself, Randy?
Identify some use cases inside and outside your organization that might be a good starting point. So take a look at some of the speakers have said today, take a look at other examples and try to start small and build it out to convince leadership and other teams that this is a viable model and gain momentum. And the other part to that is identify like-minded people within your organization and put them together, because I guarantee there's people passionate in AI in your organization. Just put them together and point them in the right direction, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with the results. What about yourself, Kim?
I think my greatest learning actually came during COVID when we were doing a lot of the COVID modeling. And I think it's really about understanding that your team expands. I think within healthcare, traditionally, we have decision support units that ones and zeros are often tossed over the fence and the data people will figure it out. And I think it was really the idea that it requires the clinical teams, it requires the clinical program admins and the analytics and data and IT to come together, both to generate the predictive models or whatever type of AI that you might be implementing. But it's also that, and I think the rest of the panelists today have pointed to governance. It's making sure that we all understand who's on first for what aspects of challenging those model assumptions, recalibrating, understanding the data, bringing their expertise forward. So I think it's really about understanding that as inputs change, everybody has to come back to the table and bring their expertise or their lens forward.
And Brenna, what would you say is your bit of advice and learning?
So I would say from my experience just implementing AI and predictive models, at the end of the day, big data and infrastructure that can process in near real time power AI. So don't underestimate the importance of these two things because you can't implement and scale AI without it. So I recommend solving this first because that will set you up for success. And then similar to what Randy mentioned and some of the other panelists, start small and start with a real use case. Pilot it, iterate it, and then scale it, and make sure you measure the impact and socialize your learnings, because ultimately that will help you get buy-in to implement more use cases and to continue to do that, and then to ultimately go bigger with what you're able to accomplish and the impact you can bring.
And panel, we are the best because we are still in advance of the time. So what I'm going to do is just quickly take a look at the Q&A, and it's asking about what's the most promising use case. You all have very promising use cases, if I can say in my humble opinion. What I'd like to know is what was your biggest AI threat to your business in one word or in a short sentence, because if our audience wants to learn more and deep dive into that, they can connect with you on LinkedIn. So let's start with Kim.
Probably time. It's a precarious time and just all the change.
Randy.
I'll go with data. The AI model is only going to be as good as your data, so make sure that you're finding your data and using the best data to train your AI.
Brenna.
Randy stole mine. I was going to say biggest threat was bad data and unstructured data that requires a lot of work to prepare.
And Henry.
I think it's the people at the table. Those are you got to be really careful of, I mean, not careful. You need to know who you need at the table to do this, because your results aren't good if the people that are accepting it aren't happy with it.
Great answers. You've been an absolutely amazing panel. And what I would leave you with from my perspective in terms of takeaways, change is a constant. It just is. We know that it's scary, but the growth opportunities and potentials far outweigh staying in your comfort zones. So summarizing everything that's been said, go for it, try it, do your absolute best, and learn from every experience. Thank you all once again. Have a great rest of the event.